course, that you don't have the...
Okay, so just to begin, you can say...
Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can say your name and what you do in maps. I don't know how to say this.
Okay, no problem.
Title? Okay, yes.
Okay, so I'm Stefan Raubenheimer. MAPS has 3 directors, Marta Torres, myself, and Harold Winkler. 2 of them are researchers at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. And I come from a process background, so we complement each other and bring these 2 major disciplines to MAPS, the discipline of research and the discipline of process.
Okay, perfect. Good. We wanted to know how the project is remembered in the people. So do you know what Plan CC stands for? Do you remember?
Yes, it's the Plan for Climate Change.
Yeah, very good.
It's a nice name, it's catchy.
Yeah, it's true. So, okay, let's begin with the questions. Yeah. So how do you see the progress of Plan CC from the beginning until now?
Well, I was looking at the chronology of events, and it's surprising and interesting that we've been working on Plan CC now for a number of years.
Yes.
This is to be expected, you know. Our own project in South Africa stretched from 2005 to 2008, if you look at the entire project cycle. Really, we started in 2011, I think, when I linked up with Maria Paz and Sigaran and Pia Zefayos, and we asked them to be champions for this idea, since they had very good connections in government at the time, and also amongst the general leadership and interest players in the Peruvian political economy. And they did an astonishingly good job in helping to present this idea. So we co-presented the idea. That's where it started. Where are we now? From something that was completely new in Peru, which we'll talk about later, to a situation where this idea is now central in the discussions at the very highest level of this government, at the very highest level of business leadership, and at the very highest level of civil society. That is an astonishing progress, and one which I think the team can be amazingly proud of. So, yes, you can say that everything that we want to achieve has largely been achieved so far.
Okay, so your expectations have been
yes,
from the beginning till now?
Yes, of course. This was not easy, and there were periods of great difficulty and challenge, and we can talk about a few of those. But what is important is that we are here at this particular point. And look, there's something special also happened, which was a surprise to all of us, and that is that the COP at the end of this year is in Lima. And so this was not part of the plan in 2011. This has brought a very important impetus, also very important problems and challenges to the whole process. But as I say, we can talk about that.
Okay, great.
In general, when I say we, our joint collaboration, but particularly the team that runs Plan CC has done a very, very good job.
Okay,
yeah.
Great. Do you consider that the objectives that were set by Plan CC in the first phase 1 of Plan CC, are they useful for the country? Do you consider they are useful the way they were planned? Do you think it's useful for the country? And what do you know about the objectives for phase 2 of Plan CC?
Yes. When we consider this particular question, we are essentially saying how useful is it to any country, particularly now Peru, leaders of the political economy of Peru, to get information about about the reduction of emissions. How useful is it? And this is a big debating point. There will be some people who will say that Peru's emissions are much less than 1% of world emissions, so it's not relevant, it's not important, it can be ignored, at least for another 20 years. And the question is that the correct view? There are others who will say that we hope, in fact, we must change the entire world economy, and for Peru not to be on the bus with all the other countries. For Peru not to be in the team with all the other countries would be a terrible mistake. It's a mistake for competitiveness, it's a mistake for political legitimacy, etc. So, even though the emissions of Peru are very small, some kind of significant example must be set by Peru and all countries. There's no exception here, except perhaps for the very poorest countries where emissions are insignificant. Of course, this becomes more important when you are the president of the COP. That example needs to be set perhaps first before everybody else. You can't wait a little bit and do your homework at a more slow pace. You're under pressure. And in that way, I think it's very important that Plan CC can help to solve some of the problems there. So really the primary objective of a project like this is to change the political economy of this country, and to do so sensitively to its realities. Okay, this is not an ideological project to force change that is bad for Peru. This is a pragmatic project. At the same time, it does attempt to bring the very stark difference between what science is saying we must do in the world and the realities of our countries, Peru included, and to highlight how difficult this problem is. It's not going to be very easy at all. So that's why you spend a few $1 million and 2 years trying to work on this very, very wicked and difficult problem. It's not something that you can, the solution isn't there very quickly. And in fact, with the work we have done so far, we are not yet seeing the full solution. We have to move to phase 2 objectives. What we have now is, at the end of phase 1, which is now very imminent, shortly, we will have what I like to call a big basket of data. This is particular data. This is information about, in the case of Peru, 77 mitigation actions, possible actions one can take that will reduce greenhouse gas emissions, thoroughly analyzed. Analyzed not only in terms of the size of those actions, but the cost of those actions. Those are then logically packaged into groups. Each group is then analyzed against the economic realities of the country in terms of co-benefits of various types. This is done in a scenario format over a time horizon up to 2050. That's the raw material. It's just the beginning, it's not the end. It's not the thing you really want. It's not what is going to make policymakers change.
No, but it gives you the basis.
But it's the foundation. So now in phase 2, we must take that raw material and we must start to translate it into what are policymakers particularly interested in. And they are interested really in, I think, the impacts on the economy of certain actions. Are those impacts good impacts or bad impacts? Are some of them necessary impacts, and therefore even if they're a little bit bad you must take them, but you can combine them with good impacts and set the one off against the other. What are the easy big winners? What are the losing projects? Who are the losers? This is going to be very complex analysis, which we will start next year after the COP in Lima. And it's really an analysis that I think will involve much more the economic leadership of the country. It becomes profoundly an economic analysis. I think we also have to think in phase 2 about the uncertainties of the long term. You know? The models, computers tell us, oh, what's likely to happen is that. And we look at those lines and we think, okay, this is true, this is what's going on. It's not true. These are just guesses. If you do this in a system and a whole lot of things stay the same, this is where it's likely to go. But the thing with systems, and we understand with complexity theory, systems thinking, that systems have a lot of interactions that are very complex and they are unpredictable. Simple things like GDP growth can change completely from what you predicted. So we have to start saying to ourselves, in all honesty, the period after 2030, more or less, becomes an unknown period. And all we can do is to try and either guess what we would like to see happening and then take some actions that set us on that course, or even more importantly, say what we want as objectives and try and work backwards from those objectives. And our data does not tell us that. So this is an interesting challenge, not only in Peru but elsewhere in the other countries in maps as well, which we will look at. So I think also finally for phase 2, we're looking very much at finance and investment. The immediate short-term implementation investment work is of interest to the government, and we will look at that. I think typical of Plan CC is also to present this material to the broader public and bring it and popularize and make it understandable is going to also be a good job for everybody for next year, and something I must say you are all very good at doing.
I must say that I hope everyone would know about second phase objectives as well as you.
No. Well, we're still developing them, and you know what we have to be honest is that we must stop quite soon because you have a very big job in the COP, and that's important. Get that behind us, and then we can sit down and say, you know, exactly how we structure phase 2 is a job for early next year.
We want to stay focused on finishing the first task.
Yes.
In July, and then
we remarked this morning to the Minister of Finance that for the project, the COP is maybe 6 months too early. But unfortunately, we can't move it.
It's true. Actually, the NCC was supposed to finish in March, February this year, but then it was not possible. It wasn't going to happen, so we had to. But anyway, I think we're going to do both fine. We're going to finish it. We're going to do what we have to do for COP and beyond, and it's just a matter of time.
It's a pressurized environment right now for everybody. So
just that everyone is thinking about COP right now, no? But
well, I think the interesting thing about COP now is the Conference of the Parties, is that Lima COP is a very critical stepping stone towards Paris. In fact, I think Lima is almost more important than Paris, because if the breakthrough happens in Lima, in terms of intention, the statement of intention becomes clear, then hopefully Paris will be the formalities of turning that into rules and legal form and so on and so forth. But I think Lima is the time, the emotional time, for parties to say, look, this new report from the science is terribly urgent. We have to act. And here is my... I'm not waiting for anybody anymore. I'm going. And I think the action by Peru as the leader of the COP may in fact well be the start of that. And that will be very critical. You know?
That would make a difference, I think.
Yes.
With other.
So of course we now have the pressure of this data from phase 1 suddenly being required to develop the contribution by the Peruvian government, which is a hugely pressurized requirement at very short notice, and it's not even clear what
do we have to do.
we have to do. So that, we must finish phase 1 quickly, so that you've got 6 clear months before the Lima COP to make sure that what you say at that particular point is critically important. It has to be right. You can't make a mistake. Yes.
But yes, you're right. And now moving towards the methodology that we have used in Plan CC and that you're very familiar with, because it's very similar to the one used in MAPS. What do you think about it? About the methodology, the way it was used in Plan CC? Was it similar to the one used in MAPS and other countries? Do you have experience, going through what happened in the other countries? How do you see it similar between what we did here to get to the results to what was done before by you and by the other countries?
Look, first of all, what binds the whole MAPS approach within all 5 countries that have participated, Brazil, South Africa, Colombia, Chile and Peru, is the involvement of stakeholders in the generating of an evidence base for change. Okay. Everybody had their own specific formula of doing that involvement, and I think where there were a commonality is the weight and importance granted to stakeholders to influence the outcome. The old traditional way was that a consultant or a university produces this information, gives it to the government, and the government calls some people from society and say, what do you think? And they either jump up and down with happiness or they jump up and down with unhappiness, and the government has to either go back to the drawing board or it can promulgate this particular decision. The MAPS puts that on its head. Okay? This is the critical difference. It says each country must generate its own indigenous, made in Peru database, and that evidence base is generated by all the players in Peru, not by some elite group of consultants or academics or whatever. Even players like non-expert civil society members are involved. And this creates this sense of ownership, and that was common and I think very well done in all the countries in different ways. Then of course the second part is what are the tools you use to generate this evidence base. And there we have some differences. Okay? I would say that as with all tools, it's like cell phones, they start big and they get smaller. The tools are changing rapidly, and we are trying to stay in line with these changes. The original job that we did in South Africa was to use an optimization model that was then analyzed through a CGE model, a second model. This format has been used again in the 2 countries, Chile and Peru, and it's a very successful formula to understand and predict some of the economic consequences of certain actions. Of course, the problem with it, is systems are very complex things, and no computer can be made to fully understand a system unless you completely replicate the system, which you can't. So there are predictions that we can make that are quite robust, and some that we really have to admit are not robust. first, and we need to know where the dividing lines are. In some ways, that's the one problem. The other problem is that the decision makers in the political economy tend more to take decisions with development objectives in our countries, in the so-called developing world. This concern with emissions reduction is quite foreign to business people and politicians and so on. It is generally seen quite negatively as, oh, you're coming along to impose a burden on our growth and development. And the way the models present this information strengthens that view to some extent, that this is burdensome on the economy. Also, the tools cannot, in that format, the format that we used in LTMS in South Africa and here in Peru and Chile, cannot also show exactly how the system is going to react to the many changes and feedback loops that these actions impose on the system.
Yeah, that's true. But do you think that it is the best model to use?
I think
considering all this.
I think, to be honest, that we will see development now. We're already seeing development in making the optimizing and economic models think together simultaneously on all actions. This is what the Brazilians are doing. So in some way, they are ahead of everybody with that very complex task. But what we have done here is good enough for now. And I think that it's very important to know that this is a project that never ends. You always go back and try and re-understand and recalibrate this information. But the point is you have a base to work from.
Okay. I just wanted to, in regards to something that you said about the involvement of stakeholders. In the other countries, did it also happen that you did not have experts on climate change or, the issue that Plan CC is about, in your case about the maps? Did you have the involvement of these non-experts during the process of the project, or did you try not to involve too many non-experts? In our case, we did not have much of a choice. There weren't a lot of experts in the subject. I'm not sure if in South Africa it was the same, or you had more experts in the case of Chile and maybe Brazil. Colombia, I'm sorry because Brazil is still very new, but Colombia and Chile, you think that the balance between non-experts and experts was...
It's always very difficult, is it not? Because on the one hand, you don't want too many people in the room who are struggling to understand this very complex field, and when people don't understand what is going on, they tend to oppose the process and reflect their discomfort in some way, and then you have to deal with that problem rather than doing the work. On the other hand, if you have some sort of elitist process, then it really hasn't touched people out there. In South Africa, we try to kind of compromise by having big events, small events, micro events, back to big events, and so on and so on. Oscillating between expert leadership and public processes. In Brazil, for example, there is the Forum on Climate Change, which has...
The what forum?
It's called the Forum on Climate Change, the Brazilian Forum on Climate Change. And when it sits in plenary, there are something like 650 people in the forum. So that forum is running the Brazilian project. But you can't have 640 people sitting in the room doing this work. So you have to, again, find ways of making small expert groups do the heavy lifting, and making the big groups do kind of the general overall direction, strategy, evaluation, etc. And this is a problem of design. And I think what is a feature of maps, processes generally, and all 5 processes particularly, is the very big effort one has to put to the design of the project, given specifics of each country.
That's a very good answer, actually. I think you answered the questions that I had on this. With the first question, I think you answered a lot. Because we were talking about, you were talking now about the stakeholders. If you think they were the ones that were involved in Plan CC, do you think they supported the process, the result of the project?
Look, I think the important, different people will see different stakeholders as important. The minister today said to us, which business leaders have been involved?
Yeah.
You can see he asked the question. Specifically, he said, has this been? Have you worked with the people who run the economy? And the answer is yes. Then yesterday, the facilitator said to me, one of the things that I missed was the involvement of the small manufacturing world, which is very prominent in Peru, and secondly, small actors in rural economies. They're very difficult to organize and to find the right champions who can represent the collective knowledge of those players. And again, we will learn when you do this again and again and again. You'll become richer in your knowledge of who should be in the bigger room and the smaller rooms, etc. You're not going to get it right the first time.
No, and I think we learned from your experience, and we tried not to replicate whatever didn't work with you. I think we made some mistakes. We had you before us, which was very valuable for the project. And then if we had to do it again, we would probably, think of what didn't work or what we could have done best. And then maybe this would be one of the...
I think one of the things that has particularly worked very well in the Peruvian project is the way the really top decision makers are becoming involved more and more and more at a point where there's real information in front of them, which I think is exceptional. We did not at any point at the end of the LTMS have a discussion with the Minister of Finance. We have had 2 discussions, very deep discussions with the Minister of Finance here. These are big differences, between a project that is integrated in government decision making and a project that is in a sense slightly isolated from government decision making. And I think that's been well thought through by the local team here in Lima and extremely well executed.
Very good. Maybe this answers the question, but I was going to ask if any of the methodologies or actions implemented by Plan CC do you think are innovative or...
Yes, I would say, and I'm just going to isolate 2 without saying that there are more, okay? I think for one of them that you showed many people how it should be done is the visualization work. It's been exceptionally good. The team has done extremely well in making very complex stuff more understandable, okay? However, I think that not more important, but really kind of one of the big innovations has been to manufacture a continuity between this work and the implementation. The biggest weakness of the LTMS was that it sat in isolation. It was followed by a vacuum. And all the policy steps that were taken afterwards were slightly slightly misaligned and at random, whereas I think the sense here is of a progression of events, and it's always been like that, and I think that makes a great deal of sense. It's not always possible. For example, in the Brazilian project, the forum will make this report known, and then it might be implemented or might not be, because the forum is not government, so it doesn't have the jurisdiction to go ahead and implement.
Do they have a steering committee led by a government?
No. I mean, the forum is presided over by the president of Brazil, and we'll see what he or she, depending on the election later this year, says about this work. Either this is important, let's do something about it, or goodbye, thank you. I think that's what's different here. There's been a very progressive ownership by government in taking the evidence base to implementation, and it's very important.
And what do you think could be improved? Now that we're talking about the good things, what have you seen in Plan CC that you thought, okay, this could be done better, or?
I'm not an expert on the issue of data, but I do understand that there were data problems.
Okay.
And this is nobody's fault. It's just that some data was unavailable, had to be very swiftly put together, and so I think iterations of the work will see improvements of the underlying data that is used in constructing the evidence base.
Okay.
And you know, I'm not saying that there are huge gaps and weaknesses. It's more that there are gaps and weaknesses, and how significant they are, we need to still explore. Perhaps next year, do a very careful evaluation and say, really what you want to be able to say to the world is that whatever decisions Peru has taken, it is based on a sound, credible evidence base.
Okay.
That's the first thing that I would say is always going to be an improvement for each country, not unique to Peru. Secondly, I think that in the next version of Plan CC, and I hope that it's revisited in 3 or 4 years' time, I would love to think that we can start looking at a development focus rather than a climate focus. This is a big challenge for modeling and tools. We don't have those tools yet.
We have economic tools.
Yeah. So this would be really the next frontier to chase. Yeah.
And from your experience from MAPS, do you think this methodology, the way we have involved the stakeholders, it would be useful for other kind of projects, not related to climate change, not related, to any other kind of project with different objectives? How do you see that the methodology is useful for other types of projects?
We're having a lot of discussion at the moment, Maite, about legacy, you know. And I think one of the elements of legacy, whichever way we present the legacy of this work, but certainly one of the elements is this whole business of open governance. I was talking to Zorro, your facilitator, and he was particularly interested in the big project of open governance in Peru at the moment. Not all our countries have had open governance for a very long time. Our own country is a very recent experimenter with open governance. And open governance is complex and difficult, you know. This is an example of evidence-made policy making in progress. It is applicable to health, education, whatever you want to look at. Okay. But we need to encapsulate and write up and make readable and understandable this, so that it can be taken up.
So there's something we
so
have to do.
We have to do our legacy work and see if others are interested.
So now, in regards to your participation in Plan CC, we talked about it a little bit, and you said that you started in 2011.
I think it was
before.
I think it was before. We did in 2010. We looked at 12 developing countries in Africa, Asia, and Latin America. And during that time, I would have had discussions with a team here, and I think that we really started to plan once the primary donor, the Children's Investment Fund Foundation, made the decision. If you think about it, it was a very risky decision, you know. That there appears to be a very strong interest in these 4 Latin American countries.
It was Argentina at that point?
No. Argentina was never, it was close. There was an idea, but it never really happened, unfortunately. But if you think that intention of expression of interest was by a previous government here, you know?
Yeah, that's true.
Because there was an election.
Yeah.
It was really a sense that it could work here. rather than it will work here. And on that basis alone, they decided to fund the effort.
And this was 2010, you think?
And this was 2010. In 2011, we started working on the mandate.
Okay.
Okay.
The project document and the...
Yes, the project document was really just the expression of the mandate in detail. Okay. And I think one of the biggest things that we learned in this Latin American maps was that this mandating work took a long time.
Mm-hmm.
You remember in South Africa it was just given to us.
Here it was like a year.
Yeah, it was a year of work. Chile, here.
Ah, really? Also in Chile?
Also. Colombia was different because they already had one, so there was no time problem there. And Brazil was 2.5 years of work
really?
on the mandate. Brazil is a much more complex, larger economy and many initiatives and alignment issues and this and that and the other. And I think the reason why this took a long time is that we insisted all along with the teams in Peru, Chile, and Brazil that this mandate had to be central within government, high level of ownership at the highest level, and that takes time.
Okay.
Yeah. So I would say, I remember SBT2, I was looking at my diary, SBT2 was in September in 2012.
Yes.
So we were already on the go. The launch was in April 2012.
Yeah, but you didn't come.
I couldn't come to that.
Yeah. Marta came.
Yes, yes. So, that's the time it took for us to get going and actually
like a year.
In a year to define what the project was supposed to achieve, to set up all the institutional arrangements, to make sure that we had the money to do the job, which came from a number of donors, not just from one. It turned out to be quite a complicated setup phase.
More
Perhaps.
than in other countries, you think, or different?
Just different, but not more.
Okay. So every country has its own complexity.
Yeah.
Peru has it.
And the setup phase was very complex in all the countries. No, look, this is you have to, one thing we have to tell anybody who is interested in the story is that it's a difficult thing to put together. It takes time.
It was for you also in South Africa.
Totally.
And you were like the pilot project, huh?
Yes, we were the pilot. In many ways we were like cowboys, we kind of just, there was nothing to be lost. It was 2005. There was no Copenhagen yet, there was no Paris, there was the climate issue, we were still in AR2, I think.
But you already had a COP in South Africa?
No, that came years later. The Durban COP was in 2010.
You're
so
right.
3, 4, 5 years later. So there was no driver. There was a blank canvas, and we really just said, let's experiment. Here's some basic tools, here's some basic ideas about process. Let's throw it together and see what happens.
And it turned out very
it turned out an interesting result. Not necessarily the best result today, but South Africa, there's a lot of complexity there now. In many ways, we made some mistakes as a country in not taking the LTMS into a institutionalized process in the way that you are doing here in Peru.
And how do you see yourself in Plan CC? You as Stefan Raubenheimer.
Well, there's some serious parts to that.
Can we?
Yes, we can pause.
Yeah. ¿Cómo vas? Ya estás. Sí, ya tengo para 10. Pero estoy arriba. Sí, ya, gracias. Okay.
There's some serious answers and some not serious answers. I like to put it this way. The serious answers were, that I was really responsible to help Maria Paz and Pierre at the time to articulate the proposal and offer it. I was responsible to say to everybody here in this country, we are not trying to do what we did in South Africa. We are not replicating some recipe.
Yeah.
But we learn something. Are you interested? And if you are you interested not only in doing something similar, but also doing something together? And I think that general recipe worked very well. You know? And Harold and I were very specific about the recipe being one of collaboration and not replication. Yeah.
So you see yourself as a collaborator?
Well, at the early phase of Plan CC, I was really somebody coming and saying, let's collaborate.
Yeah.
You know, here's an idea, and I'm delighted that Peru took the idea up and said, yes, we agree, we like the idea. There are reasons for that as well, I think, that are important. One of the reasons, and this was intentional, is that this was a collaboration of the South. You know, we have similar problems. We have poverty, and we are by no means established countries like the European countries or the US or Japan. There are fundamental and large differences, and they mean that we have issues that need our own understanding and our own discussion. And I think that the importance that we felt about this collaboration was that it was firstly a collaboration amongst friends who had the same problem, and it was not a supervised collaboration. It was our own collaboration. And I think this was the recipe. Then the second serious thing, I suppose, was that to some degree I could bring a lot of thought leadership to the process side, because this was the part that I had done. And I, instead of you learning by trial and error like I did, I could help to eliminate some of the error and the trial and bring about some certainty, and to train facilitators, which we did, and Zorro is part of that group.
I think it was thanks to your participation during SBT2 that sort of became our technical facilitator.
Yeah.
We didn't think.
We added.
It was because of what you said after the meeting that we thought, we needed a technical facilitator.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think now one of the things that has happened, that's the funny part, is that now I feel a little bit like I am a mascot to a process that is going very well, and I don't have too much of a role. But when I come along, everybody goes, "Yes, Steph, he was part of the original idea," and people do some nice things, So it's very complimentary, and the Brazilians were laughing the other day and saying every time Steph comes to Brazil, everybody works 3 times harder than they normally do. Or we have meetings with ministers that we would never have, and all these stupid things. And I suppose then the last thing, which is a serious thing, that I'm now going into the phase where, in addition to really wrapping up what we're doing well and taking pride with you in the final products and the way they will impact both international and domestic policy and make some history in this country and in the other countries, I also now want to really start to reflect, and to write and to think a little bit about what is it that we've done and what's unusual about it and what are the messages and so on, in this hope that others may read our work. And in that regard, I want to, encourage a very strong collaboration. I think one of the really interesting characteristics of MAPS is that we've become a family of friends. So, this is not usual. The friendship element is immense, I come to these 4 countries feeling that I'm reuniting with friends. The welcoming party is so wonderful. The hospitality of ministers. Why are they letting the South African walk into their office and listen to their problems because of this trust and this collegial atmosphere that we have built. And this may sound very emotional, you know, but it's the cement of a collaboration. So I want to write about that with the team. You know, I'm collecting a group of authors, and we're going to try and write a good book. And at least when we part, which I almost don't want to think about, but it's going to happen at some point. We've done something that we can all be very proud of.
That's true.
Yeah.
So you have felt part of the process, of Plan CC process. Have you felt good? Have you felt part of it? Have you felt good?
I think my biggest irritation with myself is there's the language barrier and the distance barrier. Getting here has become more and more difficult as the airlines restrict flying across the Atlantic to one flight. There's one flight. When we started, there were 4 from various points, including a wonderful flight on poor Malaysian Airlines between Cape Town and Buenos Aires direct. 7 hours, and then a little hop to wherever. Now it's a 25-hour mission, and also stupidly, if I'd known how long we would have worked together, I would have gone on a big crash course in Spanish and become really fluent in Spanish. It's irritating that I can listen to them, understand or whoever, and understand 80%, but I haven't become a conversant Spanish-speaking person.
But
so
it's good that you understand that.
No, it's helpful. Okay, I have to concentrate, but I can. I'm not an idiot. I've got a little bit of background, but despite those big difficulties, and despite the fact that I have to try and travel less and all that stuff, I have. It's not only Peru, it's all 4 countries. I have felt an amazing collegiality. It's been very. I probably. I'm getting grey, and it'll probably be something that I will put down as one of my most wonderful career achievements. This project called MAPS. Not least because of the friends we've all made.
That's very nice.
Oh yes, I felt a part of everything, no doubt about it.
So, what do you think has been your main contribution to the results of Plan CC?
Look, let's be really honest. Plan CC is an ongoing project owned by the Peruvians, run by the Peruvians, inspired by Peruvians. I have a very small little role in coming here and going, what about thinking, no, maybe that's a problem, I have a security role as well, It's okay, we tried this. Someone else has made these mistakes. Sometimes I can bring some creativity, but really at the bottom end of the analysis is the bedrock of this is an indigenous project by Peruvians. What is different is the collaboration element. In the collaboration element, we have a nice big team in MAPS International, a big team in the Energy Research Centre at the University of Cape Town, and all the teams. If you put us all together in one room, if we could all be there would be over 100 of us, who have possibly even 200 of us, really intelligent, creative people who have worked on this collaboration together. That's worth millions of dollars.
Sure.
Yeah.
And do you think that Plan CC has contributed to the MAPS process in general?
Oh yes,
and how?
yes.
Yes, and how? How do you think the project has contributed?
I think that there was. I'm going to be very honest. There was a time where everybody said, "Oh God, Peru, it's such a struggle," and there's a time where, in the packaging of a project, it can be painful, and everything was painful. Agreements with donors and donor committees, and it was a real struggle to put all that together.
Was it prior to initiating the project?
No. This was during the institutional design. After the mandate was actually achieved, and setting up the research institutions, and there were some difficulties with some of the work. You'll recall, some of the sectors were very difficult, and we felt that there was a lot of risk. The sense now, only 6 to 10 months later, is that risk has been extremely well managed. And in fact now, I would say that there is an extraordinary example of political leadership developing here in Peru. Now, this contributes to maps in the sense that others can see, the Chileans can see what you are doing, you can see what they are doing. So the contribution is in the demonstration value of your achievements to the others. Maps is not some abstract program. Of course we tell donors what has happened and they go, well done, here's some more money, okay? And from their perspective, something is being achieved. But the really important thing is the 5 countries that are playing together in the sandpit can look at each other's toys and say, that's good, I want to do that, and I want to do it as well as you're doing it. And I think in that regard, Peru is now producing some exemplary and moving work, and it's going to accelerate up to Lima, hugely so. It's going to be very, very important. Yeah.
We think so.
Yes.
And do you think that, now it's Colombia, Chile, and Peru, and because Brazil is, the process has been a bit different. It started later, and they have their own way of.
Yeah, look, let's just be clear that the Brazil project actually has been going on for the last 3 years.
Really? Oh, okay.
Yes, but it is phased in a different way. The first phase was a desktop study on scenarios. The second phase was a preparatory political phase, and the third phase is the forum phase, which has just begun. And this was necessitated by the fact that there wasn't a clear political mandate to do a project in the same way that we have done in the 3 Spanish-speaking countries, where multiple ministries have immediately taken ownership.
Yeah.
The situation in Brazil was that there was no possibility of multiple ministries owning and running that project.
That would happen. Like
there is
in Colombia and Chile.
There also is the reality that there are 3 projects running in Brazil. One in the Ministry of Finance, one in the Ministry of Science and Technology, and one in the Forum. And that is of interest to Brazil because they can look at the problem from 3 perspectives. This is different from Plan CC, which is the project of the government of Peru. Okay. So in Brazil, we're operating in a slightly more complex environment, and it's less clear whether we will have the same degree of influence, we being the MAPS project in Brazil, which is called IES Brazil. Will it have the same influence? We hope so. We hope that because of the unusual tools and the unusual format and the excellence of the information, that it will eventually, but it's going to take longer. Okay. That's all. It will only start to happen next year.
Yeah. Do you think that these 4 countries, once they finish their phase 1 or phase 2, there will be a difference in, they will set something for the other countries to see? You have 4 countries that have done all this research, that have done all this, that has all this data, has produced all this data, and they have put all this into a political wheel, or do you think this will make a difference in the region, that these 4 countries have implemented projects such as MAPS or like MAPS approach? Do you think it will make a difference in the in the region, in the Latin American region, in the long term?
Look,
Was that an intention of the
No.
maps?
No, I think the intention was to do something that is of value to the country. So what is the impact in the world today? I mean, LEDs, low carbon development strategies, green growth planning, these things are happening everywhere now. Okay. I think what sets maps aside is the way we're dealing with process. This is, I think, generally being recognized all over the world now. As, oh, that's interesting. Let's see how it works. So let's see how it works. By Paris, at the end of next year, we can sit back and we can say, did it work? We can do some evaluation, and thoughtful evaluation at that, and self-critical evaluation. I get the sense in talking to people from the US, Europe, and Africa, in a few Latin American countries, that maps is very highly thought of. Maps being Peru, Chile, Colombia, etc., is very, very highly thought of, and people are looking with great interest. But we're not finished yet. Let's do the job. Let's do the job.
So this is just like my last question, so we're going to finish with this. But I just wanted to know, in regards to the results that Plan CC has presented so far, are they similar to the ones presented in the other countries? Are there similarities in the way we have presented our results or what we have achieved so far? And which of these data that has been presented by Plan CC do you consider is the most relevant for the country?
Look, I think that there are big similarities between Chile and Peru.
Okay. So that is
there's some small nuances. Chile has adopted a kind of band for the business as usual rather than a single line.
Okay.
South Africa had 2 lines, and these are small differences. Okay. But largely, the kind of analysis follows a similar format. The kind of stakeholder management follows a similar format. Both countries have done, I would think, a rock-solid job in doing that. Colombia, of course, did sectoral analysis. And what happens when you do sectoral analysis, you can be much quicker in bringing the sectoral analysis to sectoral implementation, and they are busy with sectoral implementation already. But their problem is now they don't have national information for national economic information from that sectoral analysis. So it has its advantages and disadvantages. Brazil, the format will look completely different. Completely different. When the final results are out, that will be like chalk and cheese,
Yeah. Can you compare the results from the different countries? Can you make a comparison between the 4?
I think it would be very interesting when the dust settles to look at Chile and Peru and say, how did this enable activity in the political economy? What were the small differences that... this is a nice PhD for someone to write. You won't be able to really compare the Brazilian... because they are going to run the entire thing starting with a CGE model and starting with a shadow carbon price, which is a very different method and approach.
That wasn't the objective either, that you could compare the results between the different maps processes.
No, we had some objectives about using common parameters and so on.
I remember that.
And I hope that we haven't used parameters that are so different that they look ridiculous. And we'll still have to kind of think about that. But no, we really did not want to impose a formula.
Okay.
Other than the idea that this is a dialogue-driven process.
Yeah. Okay. And just to finish with this, what are the main challenges that you think the project has faced, and maybe for the next phase that is starting as soon as this one finishes? What do you think will be the main challenges for that?
We're talking now Peru particularly,
Yeah.
Plan CC.
Yeah.
I think that the biggest challenge now at the moment is the challenge of time, you know, of managing the production of the first phase report, the production of at least good material for Ban Ki-moon Summit in September, Lima COP at the end of the year, and Paris next year, and all the events that happen in between where ministers and the president talk to people. This is almost an unbelievable task. But at the same time, you know, when the fire is hot, you must cook, you know, and this is what we're in. And I just hope that we can manage that without making any glaring mistakes, you know, that you make in a hurry because you're struggling with time. So that to me is challenge number one, is just getting through this year, because on top of producing this, the team has other jobs in running and looking after some of the other components of this COP.
Okay.
So it's a brave year for the team in Peru. Next year we can, you know, reflect a little bit, sit back a little bit, we have a little bit more time, and we can try and, you know, shine up the eventual result and put it in front of the president of the country and say, the job is done.
Yes.
And try and do that by the middle of the year, I think. So there's enough time for the politicians to reflect and look carefully, ask questions, and so on. So I think that's the big challenge. There's a particular challenge in translating a complex, large database which is built on options. It's not really a database, an evidence base that is built with options to a political decision to commit a certain contribution.
Different publics, no? Because
there are different domains here.
Exactly.
And we must be careful to build a bridge between the two processes, which the one respects the independence of the other. And this has been a discussion we've had in the last 48 hours. Exactly how to do that and preserve the integrity of Plan CC's output. Because this contribution is where you start having some controversies. You know? Depending on the level of ambition and the impact on different sectors and even on specific companies and operations, it becomes controversial. Whereas this is not controversial, we hope. Because it's saying, if I do this, this will happen. If I do that, this will happen. You know? It's just ifs. Whereas this is real.
Yes. Okay, so this is, I think I've covered everything that I had in mind. Is there something that I said I was going to ask?
You had something about the MAPS approach, but I think we've...
I just wanted to finish with this.
Yes.
Because for that, I need you to look at the camera. Before I didn't, but now yes. And do you want something to drink before?
Yeah.
Water. Just before we start. Do you want water?
No, I'm fine.
No? Okay.
That's good.
So I just want to ask briefly what MAPS seeks to achieve in general, and what has been the approach that you developed for doing this, the MAPS approach. If you could just briefly explain what it is, that's it. So let me see if this is, everything's good. Yeah. Okay, you can smile. Okay, good.
Okay. The MAPS approach is really an approach in which we consider how systems change, particularly complex systems and difficult changes. One of the most difficult and head-scratchingly complicated changes in the world today is the change brought about by the science of climate impacts, necessitating the reduction of emissions from mainly the use of fossil fuels and land use practices, transport practices, etc. This is going to be a revolutionary change to the way we live. And when you want to change very complicated systems in a big way, you will find that there are different methods to drive that change. So MAPS is a response to that problem. And what we did in thinking about the problem of driving systemic change was that there are two ingredients in doing that, and the one is information and the other one is people. Information means that you must build compelling information, and people means that you involve people in doing that and also allowing them to change as a result of the information that they explore, discover and generate. So broadly speaking, MAPS was an idea of bringing people in society together with researchers, people who generate information using tools like models, into a dialogue and saying, here is the society, the system that we want to change, here is the problem that we want to address. Let us co-create the evidence base that will act as a driver towards willful change of that society by its leaders. And this sounds like a very simple thing to do, but in fact it's deeply complicated because we are looking, in the case of climate change, into the future, sometimes up to 40 or 50 years from now. So we are not just changing what is happening today, but we are trying to show how changes that occur over the next 30 or 40 years will influence the system and the emissions that come from that system, in this case a country. So central to MAPS are really three things. The one is to get a mandate from the leadership of that country to do this task, to own that task as your own, not to contract it out or to give it to some distant expert, but to indigenize the solution. Secondly, to bring the very best research, both people and tools, into the room, and then to link them in a constant evolutionary dialogue with players from society that are carefully selected for the purpose of that dialogue, to build an evidence base that can drive change, and in doing so, build the capacity of all these players to understand, this is the change that we want. Mm-hmm. This is the heart of the MAPS approach.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Right.
If you would have to define Plan CC in one or two words, what would you say Plan CC is? Whatever is on top of your head. In 2 words.
It's an exploration of the future.
Awesome, I like that. That's great.